again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser. Welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined by two of my good friends, Chris White, who is actually in North Carolina during this podcast, but lives in Dallas, Texas. So it's great that technology can kind of catch us where we are. And Michael Wardlow from down in Tampa, Florida. So again, these are both guys that I met through PCA, and really excited to continue this talk. These were actually the two gentlemen that I was originally supposed to kick off my series of talking about race in America. And we did a podcast about a month ago or so, and we had some technical issues with it. So we kind of had to shuffle some things around, and here we are. So first of all, both you guys, thanks a lot for joining me. And I know we had to reschedule a couple times, and Michael is now on a new career, so congratulations to that. But thanks so much for making sure we could make this happen for sure.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be a part of it.
So before we get started, I'll let Chris start. I mean, Chris, just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you think this conversation is important for us to keep talking about.
So I'm Chris White. I'm from North Carolina, born here, raised in Raleigh. I went to college at East Carolina University, former student athlete, played football there. Went to a private school here in Raleigh. And just learning, it's kind of funny because after just a few weeks ago, I got to talk to some people from my high school I went to. And we're talking about race and relations and how this impacted sports and the different ways it impacted different people. Some people had more of a positive impact with it, like in a positive way. Some people didn't like being at the school. And we all got to kind of say what we liked and didn't like about it. And so it kind of opened my eyes up as well to some of the other former student athletes that were there during my time and since my time, and the way that things are progressing. And some things are getting better, some things aren't. Some people are getting more bolder about statements, and that's been an eye-opener because it wasn't as bold with some of the things that was done. Some teachers didn't want us there, but they didn't come out and say it, but they made it harder for us in our academic environment. And some of them are still there, but some of them have since left. Found out that someone actually used the N-word and wrote it on the wall. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of like an eye-opener because they didn't do that when I was in school, but, we just don't know what was said all the time. But that was it was really kind of eye-opening, and they're still investigating that situation with that particular school. So I think they're trying to make some changes, but they haven't had a lot of changes. There are some more teachers that are African American there, but when I was there was only two, late 90s. So, but yeah, so we're, but there's been a lot of people that have had a great impact from it. I learned a lot while I was there, education-wise. I was taught a lot. Sports-wise, I learned a lot too. Just being in a smaller environment, I feel I can hone in my skills and everything. And when I end up going to college, I started at a smaller school in the western part of the state, and ended up transferring. I always wanted to play Division I, so that was one of the things I really wanted to do. I was involved in a house fire, me and my father, my senior year, about 2 weeks before I graduated high school, and so I had to learn how to basically do everything all over again. It pretty much about 50% of my body. And so in that process, it was a humbling experience, but it was also an experience for me to learn about myself and who I was as a person and grow as a young man as well. And it brought me closer to my family, friends, and also the Lord. He definitely opened my eyes and said, this isn't because of you. You're here because of me, and you're here to do my will, not yours. And so I have learned a lot from that and continue to learn from that, especially with the way things are these days. Um, so I definitely am grateful for him to allow me to see another day each and every day as well. So from that, I went to college, played football, started working, and also in that process, I'm out in the community when I was living here in North Carolina, helping others, that encouraging them that have been injured in fires like myself to not look at it as your last day. You know, it's a horrible experience, and I don't wish it on anyone, but also know that you can still go back to living the way you were living before, and also live better than you were before, because it's a testimony that, you know, you have that impacts not only people that have been burned, but also everyone. So that's one thing to also take into effect. You know, everybody goes through a struggle in life. Everybody has disappointments in life. But even with those disappointments, you can allow others to, and encourage others to not look at it as their last day. And that's one thing I've been able to do. I was blessed to have a fund started in my name. In that fund, we reach out, and it's at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and it's called the Christopher White Fund. In that fund, we reach out to people that have been burned and that go to the burn center, but also in the community, helping them with the mental health aspect of things as well, because you go through a depressed state during that time. So you want to make sure that, you know, you're encouraging people. We have a psychologist on staff now that the burn victims can talk to. Even people that have been burned before can come back and talk to them. And we're working on branching that from North Carolina throughout other burn centers throughout the United States, and also taking it international as well. So that's kind of my story on that. As far as the race and relations and stuff, yeah, it's hard being African American male. It's hard being African American, period. But it's hard being African American male or female, trying to just live your life on a daily basis. You don't know what's happening. You don't know who's and people judge you just because of your skin color. And that's one thing you want to get people to understand. It's not, your skin color doesn't make you as a person. And you don't want people to judge you on that. But that's taught a lot of times from a younger generation. You know, there was a video that came out, this little African American little boy and a young Caucasian boy ran each other and gave themselves hugs. And, you know, you don't really see color until a certain age. You know they're different, but knowledge. And so I think as parents and other people that are in your life, they need to talk to the kids about it. Let them know that it doesn't make you more or less, but also encourage them, especially with the issues that we face as African American community, the systemic racism that happens throughout and has been taught throughout our community, and what we need to open our eyes up more to as well. It is a harder thing trying to get a job. We still have to put, the option of what color you are. It's more, so is that, sometimes you worry about, okay, is this going to help me? Am I not going to get a job because of this? Or am I going to get a job? Having people in our community being able to be represented in the larger corporations. Don't hire me just because you're trying to fill a quota. Hire me because I'm doing a good job. But also, I need to see more people like me and encourage me, because sometimes I've been in board meetings and I've been the only African American person in the whole room, and I feel like I'm representing my whole in there and trying to understand where I'm coming from. Like, you don't understand what we deal with, and that's a conversation that needs to be happening now and in the future, and in our kids' lives, future kids' lives, grandkids, nieces and nephews, whoever that you can impact, let them know, like, hey, we're here to learn about each other and grow as a people. It's not one of those things that you really need to, it shouldn't matter what color you are. But it's been taught for years, and over 400 years we've dealt with this. So, say, for instance, even what's going on now, like Breonna, who was killed in her bedroom for no reason. They have not arrested those police officers. She was a EMS worker, and she did nothing wrong. But those guys are still out there doing their job, and so it's like, why are we in this scenario? Why is it that you're not looked at? It's even harder for females as well to even get a say, So it's how do we make this change? It starts, locally, and, but it goes all the way up to the top. What can we do to make these changes? How can we make a better impact for our whole society? I feel like this, our open experience, COVID, all this stuff is just basically the Lord saying, hey, I'm here. You can, but this is the way things need to go. And we're going to have to listen to God on this and learn from him. And he's also everything with this. And with that, it's one thing we need to look at as well. The community, the churches, the impact's going to have. Looking at, even the NBA, how they're doing things. Like LeBron made a great statement the other day, like Black Lives, his way of life. Black Lives Matter is not a statement, it's a way of life. Like, LeBron James is a great influence, but at the end of the day, he's still a Black man trying to live. So, yeah, he's a multimillionaire doing great things. He's going out in his community, but sometimes people don't care about that. They'll look at him, me, or look at Michael and feel threatened. And we shouldn't be a threat. We're not a threat to people. And that's where we're trying to change, working on that, and praying that people see that and learn that and grow from that, and not deal with that in the society and what we're going through right now.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So, Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your feelings of the situation. I mean, it's been several months since the George Floyd killing that really kind of sparked this change. So, tell me. I know we've all spoken about that, even with all the frustration and anger and everything else, that there's always been a sense of optimism as well, with this time around. So now that we're, a couple months beyond that, how are you feeling on the progress that we've made?
Okay. Well, again, Dan, thanks for having us both on here. I know it's been a long time coming since the first one, but I'm glad we got back on and was able to do this. But to give you a little bit about myself, I am a father of two. I have a daughter who is going away to college this year in August, and I have a son who will be a senior in high school this year. I'm also the son of two educators. Both of my parents my dad was an assistant principal and my mom was a business technology teacher, which is another term for that. She taught typing, shorthand, computer skills, business math, those types of things like that. But I also, since both of my parents were both educators, they knew the school system, the public school system, backwards and forwards. So they decided to send me to private school. So I'm a private school kid from kindergarten all the way up until all the way up until 11th and 12th grade year. My kindergarten through 6th grade years, the private school I went to was predominantly Black. The teachers were Black. You might have had maybe 3 or 4 white teachers at the whole school. We got Black history every day. That was part of the curriculum. We learned that. And then my seventh grade through ninth grade year, my parents sent me to a Catholic school, which was a big culture shock for me. One, because it was only 20 African Americans at that school at the time. I don't know if you're familiar. You both probably are familiar with the book "The Hate You Give," and they turned it into a movie. I was that girl because I had to assimilate myself and be able to interact with my white friends at the school, and then when I leave school, have my uncle or my parents pick me up and take me right back to the neighborhood where all my African American friends were, and I had to turn school Michael off and turn on, the other Michael that everybody knew. So I had to adjust myself and be able to be that person, be able to relate on different levels to different certain situations. And to be honest with you, at the time I didn't get it, but now I realize that my parents did that on purpose. They put me in that situation so I can see the other side, so I can see how other people that don't look like me react to me, and how I need to be able to defend myself and carry myself the way that I need to carry myself when I'm in those surroundings, in those areas that some people are going to say something that's going to make me feel uncomfortable, or going to say something that's going to, they're going to say something derogatory that I'm going to need to be able to handle myself so I don't get caught up in those situations. When I'm in my neighborhood, certain situations pop off like that, I act a certain way. I carry myself differently. But that's because of the environment that I was in. I might have had an angry attitude, but when I was in the other setting, I had to take the angry Black man out, or angry Black kid at the time out, and learn how to figure things out and be able to come to them and talk to them and try to correct it and get them to be aware of how negative that was and how you shouldn't say certain things like that. So it was a struggle. I'm not going to sit here and say it was easy. It was a struggle trying to figure that out, and also a struggle to separate the two Michaels and realize where I was at. I had to reprogram myself each day that I went to school, and when I came home, I had to reprogram myself to be in the environment that I was growing up in. And it was a lot of conversations that I had with my parents and with people at church and those types of things like that to try to help me understand and how to help me grow and mature faster, so I can be able to do what I needed to do positively and not looked at in a negative light. Because the stereotypes that I was getting from when I was going to school was that, one, all Black people are lazy, all Black people are on welfare, all Black people are looking for handouts, and we're all stupid. So I had to put myself in a situation to understand those stereotypes and put myself in a situation and basically go above and beyond what everybody else at the school was doing to try to prove a point, to try to take away those negative stereotypes. And I just think right now, in this current environment that's going on right now, the young people of this generation, Black, white, any of them, they all are not seeing each other as far, they're respecting each other's cultures. And they're being friend, and they're willing to come to the table to listen. I think this generation right here are the most aware and the most eager to understand generation than any generations before. And I think that is what is why the change is happening right now. That is why the George Floyd incident was the stone that broke the camel's back right now for this generation, because they are not the generations before that just sit back and were being passive and just, oh, here we go again, this is going to happen, and just push it to the back burner or just push it away completely. This generation said, no, that's wrong. You shouldn't treat people like that. not just black people, but any people. You shouldn't treat any people. All people should have the rights that they need to have. And this generation is the leading voice that is pushing this change to happen. And I believe, we've had these conversations before. I believe the young people are talking to their parents who are making the decisions and getting into their parents' head, who are, the big wigs in whatever corporation that they are, and making the parents be aware and see what's going on, because the kids are not shutting up. They are talking to their parents. That, mommy, you cannot act like this. This is wrong. We gotta change. And then, if they want to continue to listen to their kids and be good parents, they're gonna make the necessary changes that they need to make in their business and their corporations, and be able to be the voice for the voiceless in this time that is in need right now. We've all have experienced some disappointments in our lives, but we also have been experienced some joys in our lives. And the thing that's happening right now is that these young people in this generation want everybody to experience joy, no matter what. They don't want anybody to feel discriminated against. They don't want anybody to feel like they're second-class citizens. They want everybody to be able to walk out of their house, go into a neighborhood that's predominantly white or predominantly black, vice versa. You got white friends who want to come to their black friends' neighborhoods, but they're scared of doing that, and vice versa. Black friends want to go to their white neighborhood, but they know how the cops are going to act when they get in there. So it's these conversations on how to interact with one another that's going to make the necessary changes. And again, this generation is the one that's making these changes. And we as adults, when this generation is coming to us and asking questions, why, we need to be ready to answer those questions for them instead of pushing them back and pushing them away. Because what's going to happen is that they're going to turn you off completely, and they're just going to do what they need to do. They're going to figure it out on their own. And in some cases, that's good, but in some cases, that's bad as well, too. And we need to be more receptive to listening to this generation, and giving them, and just have a conversation with one another. Because I have conversations with my kids today, and they've changed my mindset a lot of stuff on certain things as well, too, just by maybe I didn't see it that way, or maybe because they're so much aware, because everything is instant to them because of the internet and those types of things right there. They are able to make an instant opinion based off what they see right now. And I just think that this right now currently was different than what it was during the civil rights movement, or the early or the 80s or the early 90s, is that the civil rights movement got us to the 70s and 80s and to the 90s. They got us there. And people thought that, okay, we've overcame, we've done all this stuff, we're done. And then, people just thought in their mindset got fixed, that everything is good. You didn't see as much openness of racism. Everything was undercover. It was more of, okay, we won't give this person a job, but they didn't come right out front. They weren't as blunt in the after the civil rights movement up front in certain areas. They weren't as blunt about their racism as they were in the past. But now I feel that with the social media aspect, people hiding behind computer screens and just expressing their feelings without putting no pictures of themselves on the screen or any of that stuff, just blurting out hatred. And I hate to say this as well too, leadership in our country, talking about just sparing hate and not love and those types of things like that, embodies and give people power to go out, come out of behind the screens or come out of the woodworks to just go right out and just blatantly express their racism without any feeling of any penalty. They are empowered by leadership. And that's what is the issue. And the young people are seeing this and they're not liking it, and that's why that's why the change is happening. That's why everything right now is going to where it is right now. It's because people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Bottom line, they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And and that is why the change is happening, and I'm loving it. You know, we've had these conversations before, like in the beginning of all this that was going on, and we were saying now how we're going to sustain this, the protest. What we're going to learn from this? What is going to change? How can we take it from the protest to get some real legislation put into place, or just having some open dialogue and some conversations and difficult conversations. I think going back again, once the civil rights movement has happened and we're going into the 70s and 80s and early and in the 90s, we have always been taught to not talk about politics and not talk about religion. And instead of flipping it around and teaching people how to have the difficult conversations. If we would have had the difficult conversations after the civil rights movements in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, had those difficult conversations, I don't think we will have what we have going on right now, because we avoided those difficult conversations because it was a big no-no to talk about politics and religion. But we have to, and these kids right now are not afraid to have difficult conversations. And that is what is making the change in this right now, in this climate that we're in right now, because they don't mind having difficult conversations because they want to know why. And they're going to ask you why. And you need to be prepared as an adult or another child to be able to sit there and not say, because I said so. You have to be able to articulate what you're going to, your rebuttal to that, and have that conversation. And you can't push away those difficult conversations, because you keep pushing them away, then you yourself is going to look like the bad guy. And that's where we are.
I think that's a great point there when you talk about that. Where, again, our generation, that was kind of the mantra is you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics. And really what that did was, it removed us from the ability to actually have dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
And you see that today. We're so polarized where, people on the left, people on the right, they can't even communicate with each other because they're just that far apart as opposed to just having the conversation. And I think, the other really good point that you brought up there is, as you were growing up, going from a primarily black school throughout the majority of your youth, and then those 2 years where you got thrown in to being one of the very few black kids in your school, I think that's where a lot of this change really has to come. I mean, we said we desegregated schools back in the 50s and 60s, but they're not. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself fortunate where, throughout middle school, when I lived, down near you in Melbourne and Palm Bay, Florida, I went to a school that we probably had a 75 to 85% black population. But when I got back to Pennsylvania, before I went to Florida, and when I moved back to Pennsylvania, the first school I went to in Pennsylvania had 0 black kids in the school. And the next one I went to had 2 black kids when I started there as a freshman. One of them was a senior. So by the time my sophomore year rolled around, there was only 1 there. By the time I'm a junior, they're gone. And I think, we're all sports guys. We actually came together as, being, sports minded. And I think that's the one thing that is so great about sports is that, once you get on that playing field, you're looking at who's going to help you win the game at that point. And, Chris, in one of our meetings, several months ago, you brought up about football. You went to East Carolina, played, Division I. Like, look, at the end of the day, to compete, you got to get some brothers on the team as well, and I think that's the beauty of sport is that, it allows us to break that down. And I think, number one, if we really get really do desegregate our schools, which starts with, the redlining that took place in the, 60s
Yes.
and 70s, where,
Mm-hmm.
You guys weren't allowed, your parents weren't allowed to get a loan for a home in my neighborhood, and because once you actually have these conversations and put yourself in the room of people that don't look like you, that's when you just start seeing the human in other people, as opposed to, hey, here's this black guy I work with, and we say hi and we say, how's it going? But at the end of the day, he goes home to his neighborhood and I go home to my neighborhood, and, we don't talk again until the next day. So if it starts at the youth, like you said, Michael, and, we get these kids understanding, and really in spite of some of the situations we put them in, thank God our younger generation is looking past some of the stuff, and they are diversifying themselves and putting themselves in crowds. And I think that's why when you look at some of these protests that are taking place and some stuff like that, it is some younger people that are pushing the envelope. So I definitely see some optimism in that. I do think sports can definitely help change this. But go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
Yeah, based off of what you just said, sports can change this. There was a video that I saw. It was on the Arena. It was on the NBA TV. This young lady, probably early 20s, loved the game of basketball. And, she was sitting in the house, couldn't go outside and play basketball because of coronavirus. So she was stuck in the house, couldn't do any of this stuff. And then George Floyd happened and everything was going on with that. And the people started going out and protesting. She decided, just sitting because of her love of basketball, to take a portable basketball goal down to the protest, set it up, and just started playing basketball, inviting people to come over to play basketball in the protest. Cops coming over that were doing the protest, coming over, shooting hoops with these people, just so they can open up the dialogue to start talking amongst themselves about, social injustice and so on and so forth like that. That's what I'm talking about right there. Those youth are being super creative because of things that they love, using the game of sport to coming down where things could get totally hostile in certain cases, but coming out there, just one little thing, a basketball and a hoop, open up dialogue through protesters and police to just go ahead and just start developing some kind of things that's going to make the change that's going to carry on throughout the years. And I just love seeing those types of things like that, and seeing our youth being the leaders in doing those types of things like that. Me being, I call myself an old head now because I'm 44 years old. But, I, growing up and being that age at that time, being her age at that time, wouldn't even thought about doing anything like that. I might have gone down there and been in the protests and, doing those types of things like that. But just being creative and thinking like that, I just don't see myself back in my day ever doing anything like that. But seeing somebody like that inspires me to inspire others to get out to do those types of things like that. And that's what we need to do when we see things like that as adults. Don't shun those people doing those types of things. Don't talk bad about those people. Those people are trying to bring some change, and don't belittle them because they're trying to do something that's going to be productive. And that's the problem with a lot of adults when it comes to working with kids or dealing with kids or seeing kids. They see kids as kids. They'll see them as having a mind of their own. They have a mind of their own. They think, they process things. And that kid right there, that young lady, thought upon herself, hey, I want to do something. I might not, and this was a white girl. She might say, maybe I don't understand what's going on with the black culture. I just know what I just witnessed on TV with that cop's knee on that man's neck was wrong. What can I do to make the change? And that's what she did. And now she's making changes. It's just amazing just watching stuff like that and understanding that people, out of the kindness of their heart, want to see change. People want to see change as a whole, and that's what she did, and that's what the protests are all about. the protests are all about the change. It's not just going out there and protesting hate or any of that stuff. It's going out there because they want their voice to be heard. And this is something that they feel is right. And it is right. Peaceful protests are ways, but if you are going out there and you are on the other end and not willing to have the conversation with those people who are protesting, but you're going out there spearing hate, then you are the problem. And in order for the things to change, you have to change yourself, or you have to be willing to listen and talk about your issues, and listen to other people talk about their issues, and y'all come together and just see how can we make the change. Don't just go out there spearing hate, because all you're doing is hurting yourself, because you're making yourself look bad in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
And nobody's listening to you anymore when you're coming out with that hate, because there's so many people in there that want this change right now to happen, that you are now the minority instead of the majority.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And, you know, Chris, I mean, what are one of the things that, you know, obviously, again, I mentioned you played Division I football, and, you know, just the fact that you battled back from being a burn victim, and, you know, a little over a year after you had over 50% of your body burnt, you battled back. I mean, playing Division I football is tough enough to begin with, you know, yet alone to come back, you know, from a burn like that is amazing. But what are one of the things that, you know, once you got on the football field out there with, you know, the rest of those guys at East Carolina, you know, what is the one thing that it really taught you about, you know, focusing on what you have in common as opposed to the differences in people?
I think for me, like I would say, we all wanted to win first and foremost. And I'm blessed to be an encouragement to people, because, you know, you're one injury away from not playing. And that was one thing that, like I said, being burned is by far, I couldn't use my hands. I couldn't do anything for myself when I was 18. So it took a few years for me to get, you know, back to where I was at. And then I even still, you know, just to be able to function on my own took about 2 years. And then after that, I was able to go out there, and I had to still prove to my coaches that I still can run and catch. And my teammates, you know, they were like, you know, they looked at me and some were a little nervous. They were like kind of scared to hit me. I thought it was kind of funny. It's football, you're going to get hit. But they were worried about if they hit me, if my skin grafts were going to open up and I was going to, you know, so I was going to get injured worse. And I'm like, I'm healed. I'm fine. Like, you're okay to hit me. I could lift weights just like you. I'm going to get strong just like you. I was one of the stronger, I think out of the receivers we had, I was like second or third strongest on our team just from working out and just working hard. It made me work harder as an individual, and I didn't see anything could stop me, you know? And so when I'm with my teammates, I would talk to them sometimes, and they were like, hey, how do you deal with this? How you do it? And I was like, I don't look at this as a stopping point. I look at this as a growing point. And I used to tell all my teammates all the time, don't, you know, yes, you might have not done well in that play. I wasn't a starter. I was a walk-on at East Carolina. So it was one of those things that wasn't even, you know, I didn't know. I had a lot of my friends that we all went out there with the same goal. I was the only one of my friends that made it. And so, you know, I had to do that too, being a walk-on. That was even more challenging. So I was, and just learning about the program itself, but just encouraging my teammates and saying, hey, you just keep doing it, keep being yourself. You're going to be able to make an impact. Just don't worry about it. Just be you, you know, just allow your game to speak for you. You know, your growth, your maturity, and that way your character goes a long way. You know, at the end of the day, you know, nobody knows what you look like under that helmet, you know. And so, you're going to make an impact either in a positive way or a good way. And so even with recruits that came in, I was like, I always talk to them about, hey, you really have to really want to do this, but you don't let this, you're not defined by your sport. Don't let your sport define you. Your personality, you as a person, what you say, what you do is ultimately who you are, So I was another thing. I just kept even pushing my teammates. They were really good, but some of them, they would get down on themselves about things. And I'm like, man, I went through this. Like, okay, I understand you got a torn ACL, but it doesn't mean you're not going to play again. I laid in the bed for 3.5 months trying to recover from something, and then having to do physical therapy, occupational therapy for about 2 years, and still having surgeries, and still trying to not get so far behind. Having to learn how to drive again. And I just told them, like, you got to keep going. Like, this is, if you quit, you're not going to get to where you want to get to. I had encouragement of my family, friends, people in my church. I mean, we had a come to Jesus meeting in the hospital. They basically told me, like, I quit. Like, I was mad about it. And I was at a point where the doctors and therapists and everyone was like, okay, Chris, if you don't do this, because I wasn't seeing it progress quick enough for myself. Mm-hmm. And I thought I was never going to get to that. I was like, am I going to get back to where I was? And they were like, okay, Chris, if you stop, then you're going to have to depend on somebody for the rest of your life. And at 18, you don't want to hear that. At any age, you don't want to hear that. But I was 18 and having to hear somebody's had to, walk with you. Somebody's going to have to help you put your clothes on. Somebody's going to have to drive you, and somebody's going to have to do this. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that. So I just took it upon myself. And like I said, I have great family and friends and a great church support, and just my faith and growing. And just, I told my teammates, like, hey, keep going. Like, there's only a certain percentage that make the NFL, but if that's what your goal is, push yourself to make it, and some of my teammates made it, and some of them won football championships and stuff like that, Super Bowl rings and everything, and they've been able to impact their community. Some guys even come back to me just with the small stuff. Like, I had teammates of mine from Florida. They're so far from home, they don't get a home-cooked meal, but I'm not that far from my grandparents' house, and I'm able to, introduce them to my family. And, they found out I was getting home-cooked meals from my grandmother, and they're asking me, at practice, like, hey, you going to see your grandma today? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to see her, because they would see me bringing back food to the door. And they're like, where you get the food from? I was like, my grandparents' house. They're like, your grandparents live near here? And I was like, yeah. So, that was really funny, because I'm getting, we're warming up, stretching in practice. I'm hearing my name getting yelled across the field. Hey, you going to your grandma's house today? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to my grandparents' house. They're like, oh, so you gonna bring back some food? I'm like, yes, I'll bring back some food. Then I hear other guys talking like, hey, your grandparents live near here? And I'm like, yep. So I'm telling my grandma, I'm like, hey, can you, do some things for a couple of my teammates? And, she would make meals, and, I got to meet my teammates, and it was just a big impact just on people that weren't close to home that could get that home cooked meal and just enjoy life, and not feel so far away. And guys still to this day ask me about my grandparents. And they're like, hey, how's your grandparents doing? And, what's going on with them? And it's just an impact of small things that you just don't realize, but just encouraging. I think that's what that's what I'm called here to do, is just encourage people. That's what the Lord's called me to do, to be the encourager to others, and just let them know that, you're going to get to where you're going to get. It might not be in your timing, but you will get to where you're going to get if you just stay and focus on what the Lord's called you to do. So that's my thing on that. Also, with what Michael said earlier about being in private school. Like Michael, I was in private school all my life too, from kindergarten to 12th grade. And it is a thing. You go to school. My mom was the first teacher that was African American at the school, and this is late 90s. And there was, in my graduating class, there was 3 of us that graduated that were African American. So there's only been a few teachers since my mom, but she was the first one, which is really crazy to think. Like, y'all haven't had a black teacher, and y'all have had, you've had black kids, but you never had a black teacher. And she taught elementary, and then the other teacher that was black, he was a high school teacher, and you had no middle school black teachers. And learning from her the impact that things she had to deal with some of the parents that didn't want her teaching their kids just because she was African American. It's like, but she had the support of the administration. It was like, okay, we're not going to let her go because she's helping these kids and doing a great thing. But if you don't want her as you're teaching your kids, you can take your kids somewhere else. And so that was a big impact, in her life, but also me learning that. It's like, okay, people are going to always try certain things, but you have to stand for what you believe, do what you know is right. And if somebody disregards you for what you are and who you are, then that's on them. Like, the other doors will open, and so that was a learning experience that I'm grateful to learn from her about, and other, like I said, my other teachers and stuff that I had, and my friends. And you do have to go in that, because that's a struggle. You got some kids, some of your friends look at you as like, oh, you go to a white school, and it's like, I go to school like
right.
you.
Exactly.
Private school. Even when I tell people that like, know that I went to that school, they're like, "Oh, you went to that school?" And I'm like, "Oh Lord." I said, "Look, my mom taught there. I was able to go there. It's not because we had the money. It's not because we're living this certain life. It's just, this is a scenario what I was blessed with. It doesn't make you any better or less of a person. At the end of the day, I'm still looked at the same as you. So having to convince people on that level. But then, you got your friends that live in certain areas and neighborhoods, you have to talk to them and say, hey, it is what it is. So it's definitely a growth and learning experience, but I'm definitely grateful for it. Like Michael said earlier, it's the younger generation that's going to make this impact that on people from this point on. I look at my younger cousins, and they're in that millennial stage. They're 25 and younger, and they will speak and say what they got to say. But it's one thing, we have to listen to them, because if we don't, then we're not going to grow as a whole society at all. That's one thing we have to start listening to. We can't, that video, I don't know if you guys saw it, but that girl that was talking out to her parents, it was a really impactful video, because she was saying, okay, mom and dad, you're wrong. Like, y'all have to change. And, once parents, like you said, start listening to their kids, especially the younger kids, and wanted to make that change, then it's going to impact people down the line and in the future. It's a process. It's not a quick process, even though we want it to be quick because we've dealt with it for so long. But I do believe it will change. I do believe that communities coming together is going to help, and it's going to eventually happen.
I agree. I agree for sure. So, guys, we're just about out of time. But as you know, I always ask my guests final question. Chris, you might have actually already answered it, but I'll ask you again. I'll let you go first. But the subtitle of the podcast is many little people in many little places, which comes from a Michael Franti song called Gloria, where the opening lyrics say, "When many little people in many little places do many little things, and the whole world changes." So, Chris, what are one of the little things that you're doing every day to help make the world a better place?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I would say I'm first and foremost, I'm just praying about the way the world comes together and becomes a better place as a whole, I would say. I'm praying that the Lord uses me to impact people, to better them, and be a positive influence in their lives. Like I said, I feel that's what I'm called here to do, just to be a better man in general for my wife and continue to grow when we have kids, and just overall just show what it is to be loved and to show love to others and not judge people by their color and being accepting of everyone. So I'm just praying that, and just that's my goal in life, just to give people, once I've been given great opportunities, and I want to continue to help people with those opportunities, no matter who they are. And whatever door that's open for me, I want to be able to help them as well get to that door, and whatever they're doing. And people that I know, I'm trying to reach out to them and say, hey, this person's trying to do this. And I just feel that's what I'm called here to do, to be a leader in that way as well, and just taking that one day at a time and just helping people open up other doors, the doors that have been open for me.
That's awesome. And Michael, what are one of the little things that you're doing every day to help make the world a better place?
Well, since we met, based off of just the conversation that we've had before, I had a friend that was when I was at Clearwater Christian College. He's still my friend to this day, Pastor Shannon Eaton. He used to always tell me, Michael, don't be running from your calling. And I went, brush him off. But as of recently, the Lord has put on my heart and realized that my calling is to teach and educate and help develop young people to develop their voice, so they can go out there and make the changes that need to be made within their community, impactful and positive change that they need to make within their communities and in society as a whole, and to change the stereotypes of young people. So people will be more receptive to listen to young people when issues do come up, because they have articulated the voice that they have been given. And I just feel that that's my calling right now, and the Lord to put that on my heart and put that on my spirit, that I need to be doing those types of things in a more broader aspect right now to do that, and that's what I'm doing. And I'm using my kids as guinea pigs, and kids that I've had in the past as guinea pigs to just start the dialogue and the conversation. I ask them a question, well, elaborate on that. Give me some more details on that. Let's just talk about it, and trying to help develop their voice and understand that these are some of the things that you need to be aware of. So if people come to you and you feel passionate about something, you can articulate your passion in a positive way to those people to get your point across in a positive way. And so that's my goal, and that's what I'm doing right now, and what I'm planning on doing in the future.
That's awesome. Well, guys, I do want to thank you both for joining me again. I know we did one. It had the technical difficulties. We got it rescheduled, and I really do appreciate the time. I tell everybody that once Sandy and I get out there in the RV, there'll always be a follow-up podcast, and it'll be with you and Michael in Tampa, and you, Chris, in Dallas or North Carolina, depending on where you are at the time. And
Right.
Face to face, sitting in the RV, or 6 feet apart, depending on where we are with the virus. But I'm really looking forward to actually connecting with you guys in person and having another podcast. I really do appreciate the conversation, and I value our friendship for sure. So for everybody out there listening, I want to just remind you to go to my website at danclouser.com and check out my other podcast and my blog. And Michael and Chris, once again, I thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Dan.
Yeah, have a great one.
You too.